In her book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, Susan Cain delves into the world of introverts. Her insights have gained international acclaim, encouraging introverts to embrace their true selves in a predominantly extroverted society. She writes, "Introverts need to trust their gut and share their ideas as powerfully as they can. This doesn't mean aping extroverts. Ideas can be shared quietly. They can be communicated in writing. They can be packaged into highly produced lectures. They can be advanced by allies. The trick for introverts is to honour their own styles instead of allowing themselves to be swept up by prevailing norms. Don't think of introversion as something that needs to be cured." Do these comments hit home for you? Have you ever felt like you're trying to fit into an extroverted world? Do you often feel unheard? If you're nodding along, today's podcast is definitely for you. And even if it doesn't sound like you, but it reminds you of someone you know, stick around. Understanding the opposite preference can play a huge difference in our relationships with others. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. It's great to have you join me. Today we're going to be exploring the MBTI preference of introversion with my guest Kate James. So let's just quickly recap the behaviours associated with introversion and extroversion. First of all, let's talk about introverts. These individuals are reserved and reflective. They recharge by spending time alone and usually wait for an invitation to join conversations. Introverts think before they act and may take a little longer to open up. They prefer focusing on a few things in depth and are more attuned to their inner reactions. Writing is their preferred mode of communication, and they learn best through reading and reflecting. Now, switching gears, let's look at extroverts. And even though we won't be talking about them today, sorry about that, extroverts. Extroverts are usually outgoing, expressive, and thrive on interaction. You might find them initiating conversations and jumping into activities without a second thought. Extroverts are sociable and easy to get to know with a wide range of interests. They're all about what's happening around them and love to communicate by talking. For them, the best learning happens through doing and interacting with others. Which of these do you relate to most? Remembering we can all do both, but one of them will be your most preferred. If you're listening and you're an extrovert, today's podcast will give you an eye-opening perspective on introverts. You've probably never really stopped to think about it because you're constantly working and living with introverts. Trust me, you might want to grab a notepad for this one because you're about to have some serious moments. If you're an introvert, you're really going to love today's episode. Kate is someone who totally gets where you're coming from, and I think you'll find a lot of comfort and inspiration in what she has to share. So, grab your favourite drink, get comfortable, and let's do this. Kate is an author, coach, and speaker. She founded Total Balance in early 2002, and she works with her clients to create clarity, confidence, and calm. Kate works with emerging and current female leaders and business owners who want to build confidence and clarity about their direction. Her corporate clients include The Body Shop, University of Melbourne, Aviva, Coles, Myer, CSIRO, Macquarie Bank, ANZ, just to name a few. Kate is the author of best-selling books, Change Your Thinking to Change Your Life, Believe in Yourself and Do What You Love, Be Mindful and Simplify Your Life, Change How You Think and Be Happier, and Create Calm. Kate's books have been included in the top 10 bestsellers for personal development titles. And today we're going to be discussing Kate's latest book, Quietly Confident, An Introvert's Guide to Knowing and Expressing Your Worth. In an era that rewards the loudest voices and the most followers, Kate encourages introverts to let go of outdated ideas and beliefs so they too might shine just as brightly. Hello, Kate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
I've read your book and it's a wonderful read. And it's not only for introverts, but it is also for extroverts because there's so much to unpack in it. I have so many questions, but let's start from the beginning. If you can share with our listeners a bit about your background and what inspired you from your life to write a book about introverts.
Well, this book was actually a long time coming. I didn't even know the term introversion when I started my business, but essentially I was a little girl who was always labelled overly sensitive, and that sensitivity led me to be really curious about the human mind and, how different people function in the world. So when I was in my mid-30s, I was exploring what would I do with my life career-wise and really hadn't sort of landed on anything. I was working as a business manager for creative people, which I really loved, and a lot of them are introverts actually.
Yes.
And I found a coaching course. I'd thought about studying psychology, and I had two little girls, and I thought that's, it's a really long course to commit to. And also my work with creative people made me think maybe I can do coaching and coach creatives in their businesses, which is where I started. And what happened quite quickly over the years was that people came to me who felt lost in some way, and what was really interesting is that many of them were introverts. So I found my people through my work, which was the most beautifully rewarding thing. And some years after starting my business, so I've been running my business for 22 years now, I also came across a book called Quiet, which you probably have heard of, by Susan Cain, which was about the power of introversion. And reading that book really changed my life because it made me feel that there were lots of upsides to my introversion. It wasn't something that I just had to change or work my way out of. And so from that time, which I think was around 2009, I became really interested in introversion, and ultimately it's led me to write this book.
Which is great because, in all honesty, nobody understands, unless you've read the book or you discuss introversion, extroversion, the depth of emotion and the depth of needing to be heard and understood that introverts have.
Yeah, I think that is true of many introverts. We live in a world that actually Susan Cain called a world that embraces the extrovert ideal. And if we think about what we're sold by the media as success, let's say, it's often hierarchical. So it's about climbing a corporate ladder, for example. It's often, you might see a big billboard of something that looks fabulous and it's a group of people celebrating together. So it's that idea that we'd have lots of friends and we love socializing in big groups. And, we feel that if we're not like that, that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And that's not the case. Introversion is just a different way of being in the world. And, my experience is that when we embrace that, we feel much more at one with ourselves, but also much more content in our lives.
And as you discuss in your book, there are societies that are more introverted. Western societies just come through as the persona of the extrovert is the one that people are attracted to or admire, or is the out there image, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly right. So, yeah.
Being an introvert, did you do the MBTI? And if you did, can you tell us your personality type?
Yes, I did the MBTI many years ago. My personality type is INFJ, which is the rarest out of all of the types. Mm-hmm. And again, that was another, I think, real epiphany for me, recognising that I'm not like other people. And I saw that as a good thing in the sense that, it really helped me to understand why I found it hard to fit in. I thought back to my teenage years when I was friends with a group of girls at school and I, that sensitivity that I had, which is typical of INFJs, not being able to sort of really understand why people did awful things to each other and were, pretty mean. Teenage girls can be pretty harsh. It helped me to understand why I found those experiences in group settings maybe more difficult than my friends.
And the values of knowing and understanding type and in relationship with other people as well is really, really important. I have some great INFJ friends, and I'm really well aware of what upsets them, and there's conversations I don't have, to tell the truth, because I want to care for them. There's stuff that I know that they don't want to hear. Can you tell us kind of what is the INFJ's fears? What are their expectations? They're really big picture thinkers about humanity and the world and caring. So how does that affect you? Because it's obviously the rarest thing, and so therefore there is a high sensitivity in your type of person.
Yes, there is a high sensitivity, and that piece that you've just mentioned around caring about the world is probably one of the more dominant aspects of the INFJ. They want to make a contribution in the world, and often they are in helping roles. I would say it's interesting that you say you don't have certain conversations with INFJs, and I think that INFJs can fall into the category too of not having certain conversations, but this is probably where confidence building is really helpful. We actually don't want to avoid difficult conversations as much as it's the inclination of an INFJ to be sensitive and to, want the world to be a kind and generous place. Understanding that sometimes conflict is the pathway to connection is really important. So I would say maybe the challenge for all INFJs is to lean in a little bit to the fact that, sometimes we do need to have a difficult conversation. And in a way, we kind of have to take responsibility for our sensitivity and understand that we can take things a little bit personally, but if we're able to step back and cultivate a little bit more self-awareness, we might be able to see that these conversations, in fact, build connection. And when things are left unsaid, sometimes that creates a divide that you can feel in the relationship, but it's less tangible when it's not overt. So I think sometimes it's helpful to lean into the difficulty of that.
Yeah, and that's very true. And also, I guess the same with people like myself, having conversations with those people is both of us understanding each other's type and them understanding that what they might view as an insensitive comment wasn't deliberate, wouldn't be deliberate anyway, but it might hurt them. And like you say, they, I guess, need to recognise that they can't always be hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the fact that you have the awareness of that, Kate, says something about you as a person, and that you would be interested to try not to hurt another person. I mean, this is sort of at the foundation of connection, isn't it? That we can go into a conversation and say something that's a little insensitive and recognise, maybe by the person's body language or by their response that didn't land so well. But then we can come back and say that I'm aware that the way that I said that might not have been the most skillful. It might not have been the most effective way to say that. And it's not my intention to be hurtful. We can repair. I think we forget that it's actually okay to get it wrong at times and then to go back in and repair if we have got it a little bit wrong.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I always say to people, you just go on communicating. If you do see something's gone wrong, speak about it, But
yes.
But then again, once again, that is an extroverted thing to speak about it rather than the introverted thing to bring it up themselves.
Possibly, although this is a bit of a myth about introverts. Introverts are actually really good in relationships. They're often quite self-aware, which means that when they have that awareness, they can communicate their needs if they feel comfortable to do that. So introverts typically do better in one-to-one settings than in big group settings. But you will find that an introvert will go there, will have a deep conversation with you and a really authentic conversation with you. And in fact, most introverts say that that's what they love the most in social settings, not small talk.
No.
Introverts are a little bit allergic to small talk for the most part. They would rather have a genuine conversation.
Very much so, very much so. No, I have an introverted husband. And look, I always say to people, don't ever tell me that the introvert isn't confident. They are often very confident. They've got their stuff sitting in their head, and sometimes they actually don't want to put it out there. They don't have a chance to put it out there, or they just rather keep it safe and not share it. So it's not that they're ever. It really annoys me when people say, "Oh, they're so shy," and I look and I go, "No, they're not. No, they're not."
There's a subtle difference between shyness and introversion. Introverts, it's the way that we think and operate in the world. Shyness is often the assumption that a social interaction is either not going to be welcome or not going to go well. But many introverts are really social beings. But having said that, they...
In their own groups.
Yes, in their own groups. And also they have a certain capacity for it. So an extrovert feels energised by socialising. An introvert can really enjoy socialising, but they can feel depleted by it. So it depends on the setting. But typically an introvert might want to socialise a little bit less, and they need time alone to recharge.
Yeah. And you know, that was the beginning of my marriage that I discovered all of this, and then having an introverted child as well. And I say to people, I brought my kids up using the MBTI and temperaments and stuff to understand that need to regain the energy is massive. But it's rarely spoken about, and nobody understands it unless they do this work. So I'm so glad you've got your book sitting out there. So let's go into confidence with the introvert. So what exactly is real confidence, and what, you know, how does it being an introvert impact that?
When I started researching the book, I thought I need to start with the real definition of what does it mean to be confident. And I looked at the origins of the word confidence. So it comes from two Latin words, one com, which means with, and the other is trust. The second part is trust. The fidere, I think, is how you pronounce it. So essentially it means to have a sense of trust in ourselves. And when I learned that, I thought this is accessible for all of us, to have a sense of belief in ourselves that, I mean, if we use it at a really simple level, to say the person that I want to be in the world, the person that I tell myself I'm going to be in the world, I'm being true to that. And that felt like a really good entry point to confidence for me, regardless of, so it's not about measuring against other people. It's regardless of what other people are doing out there in the world that looks like confidence. If I say, this is where I want to, these are the goals that I have, the dreams that I have, this is where I want to go in my life. If I can stay true to those things and take small action steps in the direction of whatever that is, then I feel that sense of trust in myself, and that builds our sense of self-belief. There was an extra part in this that I was really interested in, and that was unpacking the words that sit around the word self-confidence. Well, that's a phrase actually, because it's two words.
Yes.
So we looked at self-esteem, self-worth, self-acceptance, and I ended up landing on self-worth and self-acceptance as being really important goals, as well as self-confidence. So not so much self-esteem. I felt that if we use the term self-esteem, when we esteem ourselves, we're kind of measuring ourselves in some way. And often that measurement is against external factors. You know, I feel good about myself when I'm winning, but I don't feel so great about myself when I'm losing.
Yeah.
But that negates the fact that every one of us is a unique individual, and every one of us has worth in some way, and every one of us is worth working towards the concept of self-acceptance, just exactly as we are at this moment in time, which kind of calls on my interest in mindfulness.
Yes. So with yourself, did you ever feel that you were lacking confidence, or did you have your own self-esteem and confidence but didn't know how to present it in an extroverted world, or it was stressful to present it in an extroverted way?
I really doubted myself for so many years of my life. I had low, I would say I used to think of it as low self-esteem, but really low sense of self-worth. I grew up in an extroverted family and was often kind of told that I was wrong for being who I was, that I was selfish for wanting to go and have a bit of quiet time reading my book, and that I thought too much and I was way too sensitive, and I just kind of needed to get over myself. So I felt, and this is common among many introverts, I felt wrong in some way, and it was that feeling wrong that led me to do the work that I do, and led me to read thousands of books about personal development and work with a psychologist, which was really helpful, and learn to unpack the way that I was interacting with myself and measuring myself against standards that actually I ended up realising weren't even that important to me. I just don't have a desire to be out in the world, having the most fun or having the biggest group of friends or, any of those things, but learning about what was meaningful to me. So this comes back to understanding values, which I think is just such a critical factor for all of us. When we know our own values and we live in alignment with those, that builds that sense of trust in ourselves, and we can say, well, these are the things that are important to me. And I think then it feels a bit easier to find our people, and when we find our people, we feel a greater sense of connection and belonging, and the whole thing feels a little bit easier.
That's so true. And the other part about the parenting with the child is that, if our listener listening now is an extrovert and does not have a handle on introversion and they have their children at home, you really need to look at the cues and what you're saying to them. It's so important. I didn't know about introversion, extroversion early. I'd looked at temperaments and knew my son was a quiet child. But at the age of 12, he took me aside and said, Mum, I'm not you. I just want you to know I don't need people after school to come over and play. He said, I'm good. I've got enough of people. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I'd never even thought about it from that perspective.
I think that's a beautiful story that you've just shared, Kate, about your son. And the thing in that is most sort of touching to me is hearing that he felt comfortable to tell you what his needs were, and also that you felt able to see him for who he was. And to me, that's probably the most important part of interacting with different personality types as our kids, just seeing each of the individuals for who they are and having them feel that they're accepted and validated for those qualities. I have an introverted daughter and an extroverted daughter, and it was important to me to try to make both of them feel seen. But my introverted daughter would often step back a little bit. Sometimes she would be less demanding than her extroverted sister, so she was less sort of in the foreground, and I really needed to make sure that I didn't forget about her, that I remembered to see her as well, just because she was quieter and wasn't demanding as much of my time, that I still recognise that.
And today, do you see the benefit of that as they're adult? Are they young adults now?
Yeah, well, they're both in their 30s and they have children themselves, and it's interesting. Yep. We've got 3 grandchildren. 2 are really strong extroverts, and I watch them going out into the world, and I think I can see that life in some ways is a little bit easier for an extrovert. They're willing to go up to kids and say, will you be my friend? And, they're bold in the way they interact with the world. And the youngest one, she's only a tiny baby, but she's very quiet. And I think, so this is the third one, I suspect she might be an introvert. And it'll be interesting to watch, how that plays out from the distance of grandparenting rather than parenting them.
And did you explain to your children the knowledge that you have? Like, I've spent my life telling my children about introversion, extroversion, and big picture, and because I live that's how I kind of live my life is looking at all of this stuff, and they know they can go out and pick. That Cass has got her own business, and Jack, school teacher, they can pick people and they know how to react with those people, because I think children and young adults are really, they're not silly. I think that this kind of learning is so important for them so that they can take it on board themselves.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And yes, I have talked to the girls about all of this stuff because I was learning about it as they were growing up.
Yeah. Because it is. It's just so important. So what are the traits that introverts might exhibit more frequently than extroverts do?
So we've touched on some things already, which, we might say they are less inclined to be in the foreground, so they might be the ones who are speaking up less in a group setting, or maybe less talkative in general. They have a strong inner world. They often have very rich imaginations. They tend to need time alone to recharge after they've been in social settings. Mm-hmm. Many are more sensitive, and I think that comes from that strong inner world, so they can be more self-aware, and in my experience often can be self-critical. What are the other qualities?
Yeah, very self-critical. What do you do with that self-criticism? Is that where you talk about later in your book, you talk about the meditation and all the rest of it? Because that's the part that as an extrovert I find really difficult when I'm talking to introverts. I spoke to a woman once who was putting herself down about the way she was putting herself down in front of her children and, I'm sorry, I'm really bad, I shouldn't be doing this. And I had a word to her and I said, you can't do that. You don't tell your children you'll get, because they were talking back to her. I said, well, don't tell your children how bad you are. Like those thoughts, as an extrovert, I never even think that. I tell my children I'm a great mum and whatever mistakes I've made, they'll just have to deal with on the psychologist's couch. But that's my line. But that negating language was so strong.
Yes, and I don't know that that's entirely an introvert thing. So there's another profile that I'm aware of, and I don't know the MBI intimately. You probably know it better than I do, but ENFJs do this too. They're really hard on themselves. It's one of the lower percentages. A smaller percentage of the population are ENFJs, and they are typically hard on themselves. So I think it could be that combination of the N and the F that causes that. So maybe any of those profiles. But you asked about meditation. I think the thing about meditation that was really transformative to me was that it helped to raise my self-awareness. So it helped me to understand how I was interacting with myself, and I became interested in a form of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, which uses mindfulness at its core. So the philosophy is basically that we're all going to have difficult thoughts and feelings at times, and life is going to bring us some difficult experiences as well. And the way that we interact with those things changes how we go out into the world. So even with those difficult thoughts and feelings, we can still have a meaningful life. So the A part of acceptance and commitment therapy is acceptance of the difficult thoughts and feelings. But before we do that, we need to be able to see how our brains are operating. So we need to be able to almost step back and watch the thoughts, catch the thoughts and recognize we're not our thoughts, we are having our thoughts. And from that place, it allows us to create a little bit of distance in a way, not to escalate those thoughts. That's the A part. The C part is commitment to workable action that aligns with your values. So even though I am telling myself that I get things wrong sometimes in my parenting, so let's go back to your client or your friend.
Yeah.
The committed action that I'm going to take is I want, if we think about being a great role model to our children as being a value, I want my children to see me as someone who's capable of parenting them, and I want them to feel confident in me. Therefore, I won't say those things because that's diminishing the respect that the kids will have for me or diminishing myself in a way that I don't need to. So, this form of therapy I think is really helpful, and people can just Google acceptance and commitment therapy and you'll find lots of great resources online.
All right, that's a great hint for anyone listening too, because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening that would gain a lot from this kind of practice as well. So you've done an amazing job. You've written an amazing book. In fact, you've written a whole lot of books. Where can people find you, Kate? Can you give us an email address or it'll be in the show notes, or website, and can you also tell us how many books you've actually written?
Well, I've written
quite prolific.
I've written 6 books, but only 2 of them are big books. The others were smaller books, which were much easier to write.
Right.
So the 2 bigger books are Change Your Thinking to Change Your Life, and then this one, Quietly Confident. People can find me on my website, which is totalbalance.com.au. And if somebody wants to email, you can email hello@totalbalance.com.au.
Beautiful. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights on the introverts world. It's been a real pleasure having you on our show, and I look forward to talking to you next week as we discuss maximising the strengths of introverts and seeing the connection that they might have with possibly their shadow selves.
Thanks for having me, Kate. It's been great to talk to you.
If you're an extrovert, I hope this podcast has increased your awareness of introverts' preferences, behaviours and needs. It isn't all about experiences. It's about putting your knowledge into practice. Are you an introvert? If you are, I hope that Kate's information has given you the confidence to understand that you're not alone and there are solutions waiting to be used. Please take action and let your life shine. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.